Hey guys, this time we are going to make this little scene with the house and all its little details. This tutorial is focused on people that are new to Cinema 4D, but I'm sure you will find some useful things even when you're already familiar with Cinema 4D. I'm going to start off slow and pick up speed towards the end when you already had some time to get used to the workflow. So let's get started. We will start with the rough house shape and move on from there. So up here, get a cube by just clicking this button. And with these small yellow dots, you can quickly resize the cube already. I think this looks fine as one part of the house, just make sure it isn't too tall. A quick tip for the absolute beginners, by the way. You can move around in the scene by holding Alt or Option and holding the left, right or middle mouse button. Just try this out for yourself and get familiar with these if you haven't already. As I just mentioned, this is one part of the house, so let's make a duplicate of this. One way to do this is pressing Ctrl or Command on your keyboard and using one of these arrows to move it to the side. Let's go back to our first cube and click on it. In order to further manipulate this object, we need to make it editable first, which can be done with this button or just pressing C on the keyboard. We want to have these angled roofs, so we need to move one side up. And this can be done by enabling the edge mode on the side here. And now you can select this left one. But there is one problem before we can move on, which is that the move axis is pointing in the wrong direction for us. We will need to reset this first by going to the left again and enabling the axis mode. As soon as you've done this, you can see some rotation values down here. So just change these to 0 and hit apply. Now before moving on, make sure you've disabled the axis mode. And all we have to do now is moving the edge up a little so we get a nice angle. I like to do this while holding shift so it moves with round numbers. Let's do the same thing with the other cube, but first make it a little smaller. You probably don't want to scale it vertically because it will raise the floor level as well, so just keep it on the other two directions. So I make it editable and select the edge again. Reset the axis and move it up half the amount of the other side. When you've done moving the edges, enable the model mode up here again, so we're ready to go for the next part. Looking at our model now, it seems to be kind of unclear where the right part ends. It feels like just one piece. So what I like to do while modeling is going in the display menu here and selecting any option with lines. This way it is easier to see what is going on. Alright, let's finish the roof. Select both our cubes at the right side here while holding Ctrl or Command. And now enable the polygon mode this time and select the two polygons while holding Shift. We want the roof to be bigger than the actual building. And the best way to do this is pressing I to get the inner extrusion tool. And when we click and drag now, we get a new polygon which we can make just slightly bigger than the building. To give these some thickness, press D for the extrude tool, or right click and choose it from there if you prefer that, and then drag again. Up next is the door. Create a new cube again, and we will need to scale it down a lot. If you want to scale it uniformly, you can press S and then click and drag anywhere in the viewport. Then press E again to switch back to the move tool. So roughly get your door size and put it in place. But as it is right now, it sticks out, which doors don't do of course. So we will be using the cube we made as an indicator to cut that piece out of our building. To start that process, click and hold this button up here and pick the bool object. Now we need to drag both cubes on top of this bool to make them a child of it. Right now it seems like the building is making a cut on the door, but we can turn this around by switching the order of our cubes under the bool object. Also notice how easy it is to resize or move our door now, without even touching the actual building. Right now this is just a hole as you may call it, so let's add something that represents the actual door. The best way to do this is selecting this cube we originally made as the door, and just copy and paste it with Ctrl or Command and C and V, like you do in any other application. We now have the same cube outside of our bool, which is important, and we can start scaling it down just a little for detail's sake. I thought it would look nice if we added some small window decorations on it, which we can also do with more cubes. I find it to be the fastest if I just move the cube a little towards us while holding Command or Control, so we get a duplicate of it. Now we can scale and move it to something we like. And for the doorknob, I will just get another small cube because we will be looking at it from a distance anyway, so it doesn't have to be anything fancy. So just this cube works for now. Just to keep a little organized, we can select all these new cubes we just made and press Alt and G to group them. Also click on the group to rename it to door in this case. So let's repeat this step at the back of our house, but this time on the other part. We don't need to start from scratch with this. Just select the original door cube inside of the bool and also the door group we just made. Copy and paste those and move them all together to the back of the house. We also need to rotate these, which can be done by pressing R. Make sure to hold Shift while rotating so you can make the perfect 180 degrees rotation. So let's put it in place and get ourselves a new bool object again. Now drag the cube and this part of the building inside of it and make sure the order is right to make it work again. Mine isn't cutting deep enough, but luckily it is easy to move this in a little. Also for this door I don't need these decorations, so let's just delete those for now. Our next part is adding the windows. You could do this in a similar way to the doors, but for this scene we don't need to see through the windows, so we can just keep things easier. Get yourself a new cube and resize it to something that will look as a window and put it in place already. Now after making the object editable, go into the polygon mode and select the polygon at the front. Then press I and make a small inner extrusion which will represent our window frame. Next, press D and extrude the polygon inwards so we get a little bit of depth. When we move our camera down a little, select this bottom polygon and extrude it again, something the rough size of the window frame will do. And now we can select this small bottom polygon on the front and extrude this to finish our window piece. In our model mode, make sure to push the whole window in the building again. I think mine looks just a little off, so I'm going to select our bottom polygon again and make it just a little bigger. Okay, here at the side of the building I want 3 tall windows. But to keep things uniform and also faster, we will duplicate the window we just made. Now rotate it and move it to the side. And what you would initially try to do is scaling the whole window. But if you look closer, you will notice it distorts the window frame. So instead, you can go into our points mode and up here choose the rectangle selection tool and make sure the only select visible elements is deselected for now. So we can get the points in the back we don't see as well. Now drag a selection over either one of the sides and you can move all these points to actually resize the window without messing with the frames. I'm also going to make it a little taller here. My window glass is a little bit too deep, but this can easily be fixed by moving the front polygon again. This looks okay now, so let's make 2 more of these by holding Ctrl or Command and also Shift to get an even spacing. But this group of windows isn't nicely centered to the building, so select all 3 of them and move them as a group to the center of our building. At the back here, it would make sense to have some kind of large sliding door. For my own ease, I will copy and paste the cutout cube we made for the door at the front, but you can also get a new cube if you prefer to. Let's resize this to something that looks good. And now I would like to have this to be a cutout too, but my cube is already inside of the bool object and it isn't doing anything. And this is because the bool only intersects the first 2 objects under it. So the quickest way to fix this is making this new cube a child of the outer cube, so it kind of takes advantage of the first one. But there's one problem with this though, which is that moving the door at the front now also moves the one at the back, because they are linked to each other of course. So let's get this one out of the other cube and instead select both of them and group them by pressing Alt and G. This way you can individually move them. Good. To finish this window here, copy that cube from our bool again and paste it outside of the bool. I made it a little too small here, so make sure you have some thickness to it and then use our previous technique again, making the inner extrusion and then pushing the center inwards with the extrude tool. After moving this in place, we now have a nice, slightly detailed window again. Now for the last window, we will try something different and make it one of those windows that sticks out of the building. Get a new cube again and roughly size it so it looks good at our left part of the building. But before making it editable, go to the cube, its attributes at the right, and give it 3 X segments. This way we have nice equal pieces to work with. Now you can make it editable, and with the polygon mode enabled, select the middle one and drag it forward a little. When you move the camera, you may notice this object starts looking shiny right now, and that is because Cinema 4D is smoothing the object a little. But in this case we want some hard straight lines, so up here next to our object it has this thing called the Font tag, which creates this rounding. So just select it and hit delete. Okay, moving on, select these 3 front-facing polygons and press I for the inner extrude tool. When you make the inner extrusion now, it takes all 3 of them as one piece. This can be useful in some cases, but right now we need them to be separate. So go down here and deselect the preserve groups. And now you can make those nice little window frames and then extrude them inwards a little like we did on the other windows. Let's finish this window by selecting these 3 polygons at the top and getting the inner extrude tool again. For this we want the preserve groups option to be enabled again and then make them just a little bigger like we did on the roof. And then extrude upwards again. We will repeat this once more at the bottom, but I think it looks nice when we make it just slightly bigger than the top one. Let's put it in place here, and that completes our windows for this scene. To spice up the house, we will be adding some details to it. Let's start with some exterior lights next to the doors. One of the simple ways to do this is starting with a cylinder object. Scale it down and roughly place it already. And before moving on, it is a good idea to make a duplicate of it already and rotate it 90 degrees, so we can make this the connection to the wall after making it just a little thinner. Now for the original cylinder, make it editable. And in the point mode we can select all the top points with our rectangle selection tool again. And then with these selected, scale them down by clicking and dragging somewhere in the viewport. And when you're satisfied with the result, select both cylinders and group them to keep things connected. So now it is easy to just duplicate the group and placing it on the other side of the building. Alright, another nice detail would be a chimney. As you could expect, this is just a new cube again. So scale it appropriately, and after making it editable, we can make an inner extrusion on the top again, and then extrude it downwards to make it look hollow. Our final detail on the house are some solar panels, which are once again just cubes. To have a better view on how much you need to rotate these, press your middle mouse button to open all the different views. You can also do this by clicking the small icon in the corner of your viewport. In this case, the front view gives me the best way to align the cube with the roof. So let's zoom in and put it in place. So now it's just a matter of duplicating this to something like 6 panels, basically anything you like. Once again, group these together to keep things organized. So the modeling part of the house itself is done now. So we will start with the surroundings. A first thing to make is the floor. Normally you could get this done really fast with just the floor object. But looking closer to it, you can see it is just a flat plane with no thickness to it. And because we are going to build this underground garage, we will need a floor that has some mass to it. This could be any other 3-dimensional object of course, but I will stick with the cube for this one again. You want it to be big enough to give us some working space around the house, and then place it close enough to the bottom so it slightly overlaps. Otherwise it will cast some shadows and make it look like it's floating. To get the driveway to the garage, we will be using the bool object again, with a new cube. So get the cube and resize it to something that is smaller than our left side of the building. And you can already make it pretty long, but we will adjust this in just a moment. Now get yourself a new bool object and place both our newest cubes inside of it and make sure the order is correct. When you rotate the long cube something like 20 degrees now, we get this driveway effect in the floor. But to know where to place it exactly, I found it to be the best to move the cube down until it aligns with the bottom of our wall. Our next thing we need is a garage door. So I will just duplicate this cube again, make it shorter and rotate it back 20 degrees and then place it under the house. Also, the driveway looks nicer with some small walls sticking out of the sides. So I get another duplicate of this long cube and rotate it, and then scale it again until it looks just fine. At this point, the driveway looks like it just starts in the middle of nowhere, while it should be connected to something like the road. So we will be extending it a little. First, select the long cube inside of the bool object, make it editable, and select the polygon at the end here. Move it in until it goes ever so slightly in the floor, and then rotate it 20 degrees again so it is straightened out. Now we can extrude this polygon so it goes all the way to the edge of the floor cube. This way we have the driveway that doesn't look as lost anymore. A final adjustment for this is to smooth out the edge where it starts going down. So go in the edge mode and zoom in on that edge here. You want to zoom in so much that you're actually inside of the cube. This way we can select it more easily. Now right click and select bevel. In the menu at the side here we can already set the subdivisions to 5, which means it will get rounded in 5 steps instead of 1, making it smoother. And now you can play around with the offset to get this nice smooth curve to it. So that was all it takes to get this nice driveway. Up next are some simple walkways around the doors. At the front door, just a simple cube does the job, but for the steps from the street to the door, you could also use cubes again, but to get a little variation in the scene, I will start off with the disc instead. Let's get it somewhat in proportion, and it might be easier to do this all in the top view. Also, make some copies of these and scatter them around a little if you want to. I forgot to make these less round, so I want to select all of these. And then at the right we will decrease the rotation segments to something like 7. Now we can make them all editable by pressing C. And in the point mode, right click and choose brush. Yours is probably also way too big, but you can resize the brush by holding your middle mouse button and dragging, or if you're on a laptop, use the radius field down here. It is now just a matter of brushing over the discs to make the shapes a little more random. You want to do this with as less strokes as possible, because it would end up very messy if you keep going on too long. Great! Looking at this in perspective, you can see the discs are a little flat. So to add some mass to these, go in the polygon mode while all of them are still selected, and then press Ctrl or Command and A to select all the polygons. And finally press D for the extrude tool so you can extrude them. It is also a good idea to select create caps so the object is closed off at every side. When you're done with these, group them together and make some adjustments if you feel the need to. I'm also going to add these cubes at the back of the house here, and you shouldn't worry about them overlapping each other because they will get the same color anyway. Okay, the scene is starting to look more filled up now. The next step is adding some bushes to it. We will start with the trunk, which is just a cylinder as a base. You shouldn't worry about the scale relative to the scene just yet. In the object attributes, add some height segments to the cylinder and then make it editable. In the point mode, you can now select one ring at a time and move these a little so we get a curved cylinder. You can also scale the rings to make the shape a little more dynamic. What I'll be doing now is just duplicating the object and then rotating it 180 degrees so it looks like we have two branches in two different directions. Now to represent the leaves, I will be just using spheres to start with, but don't worry, it will look better in just a moment. When you go up here and then take the metal ball object, you should drag the spheres inside of it. As it is right now, things didn't improve, but that is because our metal ball settings are still wrong. So click on it and then down here you can see the editor and render subdivisions are different. This is to speed things up while working by making the model less detailed, but to get an accurate view on the end result, you need to set both at the same size. There is no magic number for this, but smaller spheres will need a smaller subdivision size to make it smooth. 3 cm works very well in this scene, so let's stick with that. Now you can see how all these spheres connect with each other, and how you can easily move these around to adjust the shape of your bushes. So when you're done with that, group it all together, But unfortunately it does this annoying thing where the axis is still at the center of the scene, and the quickest way to fix this is just enabling our axis mode again and dragging the axis in place. Now you can start making duplicates of these and making some small adjustments to make each one of them unique. Don't limit yourself to that single type of bush. You can also stack the spheres to make a higher one, for example, or anything else you can come up with. A final object we will be adding to this scene is a swing. I will just use cylinders and a cube for this, so get one of each and move both up so we can see what is going on. But you probably want to keep them centered for now. To have some reference, resize the cube to match a swing seat, and then resize the cylinder to be one of the ropes. Make a duplicate we can use for the other parts later on, but you can keep it at the side for now. Obviously, a swing doesn't have the rope connected like this. That would be difficult to balance on. So what I find to be the easiest solution is making the cylinder editable and then selecting the bottom points, raise these up like this, and then select the bottom polygons instead of the points with the live selection tool, which kind of behaves like a brush, and make sure the only select visible elements is turned on for this. Now you can extrude these all the way to the bottom and then move them to the side of the seat. To mirror this effect, just duplicate the whole cylinder again and rotate it 180 degrees. After that you can duplicate both cylinders to the other side. With the cylinder we kept in the back, we can now make the crossbeam at the top. You can also turn on the fillet options to round the ends if you like that. Now for the legs of the swing, just duplicate and rotate this top cylinder. It doesn't matter if it is too long right now, you want it to be actually a little too long. But we would like to rotate this leg around the top beam. This can be done by setting the axis of the object to the top. Make it editable, enable the axis mode again, and it might be easier to work in a side view for this one, so you can align it with the center of the top beam. And then disable the axis mode, and now while holding shift, rotate the cylinder 20 degrees. Then duplicate it and rotate it to the other side as well. Now we can just select both of these and copy them to the other side again. Group all of these new objects together so we can start scaling the entire swing to fit it in with our scene. Also don't worry if the legs are still too long, because we will make them sink in the ground anyway. We're kind of done with the modeling of our scene now. Obviously you can add or adjust anything to your liking and fine-tune anything that looks off. For example, the floor cube is way too big still, so I will scale it down. But just scaling it like this will move everything out of position. So instead, I will be making it editable and move the polygons in place. It is also a good moment to get some visual balance using the bushes. And you can also change your camera to parallel if you like to get this miniature effect and place all your objects according to that view. By doing this I also notice my driveway walls are sticking out right now, so after making them editable it is easy to move these bottom polygons up a little. We've arrived at the point where we will start lining the scene. When we would click the render view button right now, there isn't much to it yet. The first thing we can do is adding a physical sky. Rendering again, you can see things are starting to happen now. At the right here, you can play around with the time to get a matching kind of light, but it mostly depends on what kind of mood you're trying to get. But I often end up using a setting in the afternoon. These are giving me some nice angled shadows, but I find them to be a little too long. So a trick I use for this is just rotating the sky a little so it hits the scene more from above instead of from the side. Right now you can also notice how dark these shadows are. The windows are even barely visible at the side. So with our physical sky selected, go to the sun tab and all the way at the bottom we can lower the shadow density. This way there is a little more variation to the shadows across the scene. Maybe the default gray material on our scene is also a little too dark to have a good view on what we are doing. So press Ctrl or Command and D to open our project settings. And in there you can set the default object color to anything you like. Something bright will work for now. You can now notice it is easier to see how bright our scene actually is. But I find it to be still very dull and even depressing. So let's go in our render settings and click on the effect button and add a global illumination. Rendering it like this now will take a little longer, but the result has drastically improved. It still is kind of gloomy and dark, but we can adjust this by going back to the render settings, and at the global illumination you can increase the gamma to something like 2. This way you will get a nice creamy lighting. To finish our scene, we are going to add the colors and materials to it. Of course, you are free to use any colors you like, but those who are having a hard time with this can just follow along. Make your first material by double-clicking this field down here. Open it by double-clicking the thumbnail. For the floor, you can disable the reflectance channel. It doesn't need to reflect light or anything. And under the color, we will set it to some very soft green. Okay, let's just drag that on top of the floor cube. The next one will be for the roof. Again, no reflectance for this one, and the color will be a dark and not so much saturated blue. To apply this to only the roof, we will need to select our object inside of the bool, and then go to the polygon mode. Now select all the polygons that represent the roof, and with these still selected, drag the material on top of them. Also do the same thing on the other building. Let's get another new material, and all we will do is disabling the reflectance channel. This light gray will work just fine for our steps towards the door and at the back of the house. If you want to save some time, you can also drag the material on the group of steps instead of on each step individually. The next material is for the windows. I will set the color to some bright blue or cyan, and at the texture field, click on this small triangle and choose gradient. To edit the gradient, simply click on this thumbnail, and now we can double click on the small knots to change the color. Mine will go from a soft blue to a more washed out blue. To apply these, we will need to go in the polygon mode again for every object and then drag it on the selected polygon. I'm quickly going to render to check if the gradient is going in the right direction, which it is not, so go back in our material and in the gradient, and by scrolling on the type field you can easily switch between them until you see what you like. And diagonal seems okay maybe, but to get the effect I was intending to get, I will change it to V, which stands for vertical, and then right click on the gradient we made and select invert knots, so it goes from dark at the top to light at the bottom. Now we just need to add these to the remaining windows and also to that door decoration we made earlier. Next up are the bushes. You could go green on these, but it looks more playful if you take something less typical, so I will take this kind of soft orange for them. Also notice we will keep the reflectance turned on this one. This will give some highlights on the curves of the object, otherwise it would look a little flat for a round object. For the trunks, it will just be some brown. They're really small anyway, so you won't see very much of them, so just anything brown will do. For the solar panels, it gets a little more complicated because those have some kind of grid on them. So let's start with just the color, which is a dark blue, and then at the texture go inside of surfaces and pick tiles. Click on the thumbnail again to open it, and we get these default ugly red and white tiles. So let's change the colors. The ground color will be a bright blue and will represent the actual grid on these panels. And all the other colors can be the same kind of dark blue. Depending on the scale of your scene, you may need to increase the global scale of the texture. In my case, 120 will do. Next, go to the reflectance channel. At the top we want to add a new layer to this. A backman is alright for this one. Simply increase the roughness a little and then decrease the layer, its mix strength up here, so it doesn't look like a chromed out object. Also under the color channel, I forgot to set the mix mode of the tiles to add, and also decrease the mix strength while we're at it. Let's quickly render this detail to see if it works. And I think it can be a little less visible, so I will decrease the mix strength a little more. Another more complicated material will be the brick pattern on the walls. On a new material, go in the color channel and add a texture again, go to surface and choose brick this time. We get these not so pleasing looking red ones again, and they even have some darker rows between them. So before making too many adjustments, let's take a look first on how it looks on the building, so drag it on top of it. A first problem we get is that the roof color is gone. This is because the newest material we drop on an object will always override the other one. So at the right side we can drag this material in front of the other one to change the order. The other problem we have is that the bricks are totally not running straight because of the weird shaped building. This can be fixed by clicking that small material tag we just moved, and right now it has an UVW mapping projection on it, which often gives the best result. But in this case it will work best if we set it to cubic, so it will think it is just slapping the material on a regular cube. Okay, back to the material and the texture. Decrease the scale to something like 10%. The bricks can also be a little longer. And the reset every row should be on an even number to get this effect we are looking for. Let's open the colors tab at the top. And I will just stick with almost white colors for this wall. And it also doesn't have to be a gradient, so delete the last knot on each one. In the gaps tab, we will make it just a little darker than the actual bricks, but not too dark. And that will do for now. Just apply the material to the other part of the building again and reorder the materials to get the roof color back. And then don't forget to set the projection to cubic. You can also drop this material on the chimney as well. Nice. The next material will be for the driveway. A slightly darker gray will do, but when you try dragging it on top of it, the whole floor will change. And that is because we dropped it on the bool object and not just the driveway itself. So go search that long cube we made for the cutout and drop the material on that one. To finish the house, let's just add the blue material to the door and the lights next to them, or make any new material if you find that suitable. And the final material will be for the swing. For the metal parts, just something grey will do again. And for the seat you can use brown or anything you like, of course. Actually, we're totally done now. There are just a few details I still want to adjust to make it look better. For example, it might be nice to have some bushes that are just on top of the ground without the trunks. Maybe also adjust some colors a bit. And also for the windows, it seems that I forgot to set the gradient to add, so they look a little brighter. And then there are some other minor adjustments I tried out. When you're done to get the final render, go in the render settings once more and set your desired image size. Now you can click on the Render to Picture Viewer button and get the full detailed render. For my final result, I also added a white floor beneath it to get some nice shadow under the cube. So with this we can finally conclude this tutorial. I hope you were able to follow through without any problems and still learned something new today. If you enjoyed it, liking this video really helps me out. And if you feel like sharing your own end result, you can find me on Instagram or Twitter. I would love to see what you came up with.